Hey, what's up? Welcome to Scrollin' episode 139. I'm Ket, and thank you for joining me. So it's the top of the new year, 2025, and I thought this was a good time to kind of do a full assessment of my entire character roster. We're just going to go through the entire list, whether it's a good build or not. We're not going to be skipping anybody. So I'm just going to kind of touch base on every single one of my characters. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any particular character, but just kind of get a sense of where they're at and what kind of shape they're looking like going into this new year. A lot of, I don't know, it seems like this could be a weird year for PvP in this game. A lot of things could change. So I think I don't know, I feel like it's a good idea to just kind of take stock, see how everybody's doing, and see how well prepared we are for whatever is ahead. So let's just start at the top. We're going to start with Nightblades. First one is Ged Sparrowhawk. He gets his name from the Earthsea books from Ursula Le Guin. Highly recommend reading those books if you haven't. This was my first main character. So the first character that I really tried to put together a real build and really I looked up a DPS rotation on YouTube and really tried to start learning how to get good at this game. Did all the quests. He's my main crafter, all that kind of stuff. He pretty much stays out of PvP these days. He's basically in retirement, and he more or less just kind of bankrolls the rest of my roster. You know, he's the guy that crafts all the gear for them, reconstructs everything. Anytime some new questing content, story content comes out, he's the guy that does that stuff because I want him to have all the achievements for unlocking any unique dyes or skins or things like that. So his build is just a questing build. It's just kind of a utility-based questing build. When I'm doing quests, I'm basically just looking for speed and efficiency, and I just kind of want to get through it as quickly as possible. So it's a very simple setup. It's 5 pieces Adept Rider, 5 pieces Order's Wrath, Ring of the Wild Hunt, Mythic Ring, and 1 piece Magma. So you get the permanent Major Expedition at all times from Adept Rider. If you slot Concealed Weapon, you have permanent Minor Expedition at all times on both bars. So, those are, Major and Minor Expedition permanently all the time. Also, Ring of the Wild Hunt when you're out of combat. That's 45% increased movement speed. 3 Swift on all the jewelry. So we're actually over the speed cap, even without sprinting. Of course, being a Nightblade, we have invisibility. So, if we're going through a delve or through a place with a lot of mobs that we just want to avoid, just spam cloak all the way through there. We have siphoning attacks to get Magicka back if we start running low. So you can just blast through an area so super fast with this thing. And when it comes to questing, any enemies that you're going to be fighting, I mean, I'm CP, 3,000 almost. So it doesn't even matter what the build's going to be. Everything's just going to die the second I blink in their direction. So Order's Wrath is a damage set. It's just that could really be anything. I just couldn't think of anything better to put there. It's like, well, I may as well just have damage, I guess. So, but really, that could be anything. Like, no matter what your build is, you're going to have enough damage to kill enemies while questing in the overland and that kind of stuff. So that's good. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about that guy. My other Nightblade, he's a Khajiit. His name is Catface Johnson. And he was my very first character, the guy that when I first installed this game, this is the first character that I made. I played through the story. I beat Molag Bal. I didn't do, I didn't 100% the map the way I did with my other Nightblade. This was just kind of like a going where the wind takes me kind of experience, So I did miss a lot of stuff. And basically, once I beat the story, I just kind of sat him aside, started making other characters, and forgot about this dude for years, several years. It was only just a couple of years ago that I logged back in with him, finished leveling up his armor passives and a bunch of important passives that he was still missing, made a real build for him. And now he's one of my very favorite PvP builds. He's in my regular rotation, and I freaking love this guy. So his build, some people might be surprised to find I've actually dropped Soul Cleaver for now. So I'm using Order's Wrath, again, as a double bar set. Oak Father's Retribution on the front bar with a Lightning Staff, Master Bow back bar, the Sithis Helm, 1 piece Magma. And so, yeah, he's kind of like a classic ranged mag blade. He's got that lightning staff on the front bar, that bow on the back bar. He uses Swallow Soul as his main spammable. Of course, Merciless Resolve, Impale for a ranged execute. Wield Soul with a stun and breach scripts applied to them. and I like using the Soul Tether ultimate. So he does use invisibility, but he's actually pretty brawly when he needs to be, thanks to that Gaze of Sithis, also that Order's Wrath giving him a lot of healing power. I put all my points into health. So if I'm on a team that's kind of brawling it out and I kind of need to be in there to be an extra body block for everybody else, I can do that. This guy, even though he is a ranged build and he's sneaking in the shadows and doing that kind of play style, if somebody does sort of get a hold of you and tries to fight you in melee range, you'll probably be just fine. You have a lot of healing, you have a lot of resistance, a lot of sustain. Everything's kind of covered there. So this has been one of my bread and butter builds. Anytime I just kind of want to have an easy time, I go straight to cat face. So next, let's get into Templars. And of course, we'll start with old Betsy, who, I don't know, may or may not be my main character. Who can say? Certainly for a long time that was the case, but here lately I'm just not playing a lot of Templar, so it just kind of feels weird to call myself a Templar main, even though I feel that way in my heart. But once again, we are using Order's Wrath. That's a double bar set. Wretched Vitality on the back bar, Black Rose Prison dual wield on the front bar, Sithis Helm, One Piece Magma. The most Ket Sparrowhawk build possible, right? All my favorite stuff in one build. And she's just kind of a classic melee stamina Templar. I think of her as like a battlefield commander is kind of like the play style. That's like the label I give to the play style, where she's just kind of doing whatever it takes to win. I think of her as like Michael Jordan, like if she needs to be offensive, she'll be offensive. If she needs to be defensive, she'll be defensive. She can heal, she can body block, she can do damage, she can brawl, she can hit and run, just super duper ultra mega flexible. So yeah, she's very much a stand your ground kind of stamina Templar. So she uses the cleansing circle. She has caltrops to kind of build that house. Blade cloak, of course, for the Black Rose dual wield. You get that major evasion, plus another really great AoE dot. And then I have the javelin, and I have jabs, crescent sweep ultimate. Pretty standard Templar, really. Next up, I have my other Templar, Butch Mahoney. And I think of him basically as just ranged Betsy. He's just like a ranged version of the same Templar build. In fact, it's all the same gear except a different arena weapon on the front bar. So it's once again Order's Wrath on the as a double bar set, Wretched Vitality back bar, the Asylum Lightning Staff on the front bar. So that's the one thing that's different. And then the Sithis Helm, One Piece Magma. So yeah, he's a ranged Templar. So he's using Force Pulse for the spammable, the Javelin. He has the Beam. He's using Reflective Light, Degeneration for his source of his major damage buff. And I like using the Meteor ultimate. So it's just the classic Meteor Javelin Beam kind of situation. And then his back bar is identical to old Betsy's back bar. He's got the Rune, he's got Vigor, he's got Honor the Dead, the Cleanse, the Class Healing ultimate. So if you're just looking at their back bar, you can't really tell a difference between the two. And I don't know, I feel like it's a significant enough difference to warrant having two different characters like that. Like, if I'm playing Betsy, I'm a lot more apt to jump up in front of everyone, be that front line, and kind of take all those hits for everybody. Whereas with Butch here, with the range setup, I'm much more kind of hanging back. I'm playing more of a supportive role. I tend to heal a lot more because I'm just kind of more aware of people who need help and that kind of stuff. So they are kind of different play styles. I feel it's a little more relaxed, I think, as a ranged Plar. You have a little easier time of it. So yeah, I think the Templars are looking pretty good going into 2025. I don't expect much to change for them, but you never really know. Things they could get wild. Okay, next up, let's get into Sorcerers. So we'll start off with Storm Astronaut. Actually, just recently gave him a name change. It was Intergalactic. But anyway, he is my roly-poly Magsork. I've talked about him lots of times. He's using Tarnished Nightmare as a front bar set with a lightning staff, Wretched back bar with a bow, 2 pieces Engine Guardian monster set, the Stormweaver's Cavort, Mythic Pants, and 1 piece Trainee, the heavy chest piece. So it's really just kind of a classic ranged Magicka sorcerer using Haunting Curse, Mage's Wrath. I like using Shattering Spines, that AoE root. It's kind of like a Magicka Bombard. So you combine that with Streak. So you have an AoE root with Shattering Spines. You have an AoE stun with Streak, and you can just kind of constantly be alternating those over the course of a fight to keep your your enemies completely locked down, and they have a really hard time with things. And all the while, you're throwing your classic sort combo at them with your Haunting Curse, your Mage's Wrath, your Spammable. Really, any spammable of choice. I like using either Crushing Weapon because it has the built-in Major Breach, or the Scribing Wield Soul with the Major Breach script. Either one. They both work really well. But it's actually a pretty great little mini bomb because that Shattering Spines applies a 4-second delayed burst, which combos with your Haunting Curse 3.5-second delayed burst. They're both AoE, plus Mage's Wrath is AoE now as well. So you can actually pull off some pretty good little bombs with that thing. I like using the Negate Ultimate. You could also use Meteor, with that unblockable streak. Combos really nicely as well. But the gimmick of the build is the fact that he's using the Stormweaver's Cavort mythic, so that makes all of his dodging, blocking, breaking free, all that stuff cost magicka. He's also a Breton, so he has extremely good magicka sustain, and he's a sorcerer, so he can use Dark Conversion to convert all of his excess stamina back into magicka. So it basically just never, ever, ever runs out. It's a really fun way to play sorcerer because you have that like mag sork offense, but it feels very much like a stam sork when you're on defense and kind of evading and juking and jiving and zipping around and all that kind of stuff. Super duper fun. I really, really, really enjoy it. Plus, we have Hardened Ward on top of that, so we can actually face roll a fair amount as well. So it's actually a very squishy build, but also highly survivable if you play it right. All right, and my other sork is a stamina sorcerer. His name is Tane, spelled like Wayne, but with a T. And this guy is proc set central, so he's using Plague Break as a double bar set, Dark Convergence as a back bar set with a bow, the Asylum dual wield on the front bar, and once again the Sithis Helm and One Piece Magma. Basically, the whole idea is to just be a bomber, and you kind of have a constant, like a bomb that you can set off every 4 seconds, and then you have your negate bomb. That's the big boy there. But it's kind of similar to my other sork, where you have the Haunting Curse, you have the Mage's Wrath. Those both hit in AOE. So that's part of the bomb. The gimmick of this guy is he has 2 executes. He has that Mage's Wrath and Spin to Win. So you put your Haunting Curse on someone, you put your Mage's Wrath on someone, you streak in to stun them, and then you do a Spin to Win. And that's going to happen right as your Haunting Curse is popping, which will hopefully put them down into execute range, which will cause the Mage's Wrath to go off just as you're doing the Spin to Win. So if the Mage's Wrath doesn't take them out, the Spin to Win certainly will. And it's all AoE. Every single bit of damage that's happening there is happening in an AoE. So anyone who's around them is taking all of that damage as well. Plus Plague Break is in the picture as well. So if one of those people dies, then everybody else is taking a bunch more damage as well on top of that. So super fun, super duper fun. And then of course, we have that secret weapon with Dark Convergence and the Negate Ultimate. And basically that just works the same way. You just take Streak out of the equation. So you do a Haunting Curse, Mage's Wrath, drop your Ultimate, and then just start spinning to win. And Negate will pull everybody into the middle. And in 8v8s, like it's right now, Chaos Ball Weekend is happening in the 8v8 queue, and this has been my absolute favorite build to take in there because 30 kills a match every time. It's so freaking fun, especially if there's a healer on the team, because this is a super duper squishy build, and with all that's going on, all the things we're trying to do here, there's not room for Hardened Ward. So this is the classic squishy Stam Sork with Vigor and Dark Deal. That's the healing kit, So basically we can go in for a bomb attempt and then we got to get out of there, recover, rebuff, make sure our health bar is full, and then go for another attempt, get back out of there. It's zipping in, zipping out, zipping in, zipping out the whole time. Otherwise you're just going to die. And the Gaze of Sithis makes that possible. It makes you just tanky enough so you can get in there, do what you got to do, and then get back out of there, and you'll make it, if you're on your toes. Now, if you have a little bit of support or like a really good healer that's following you around, then you can be, a lot more bold in that case. But in the solo queue, you can't really count on that. That concludes the sorcerers. Let's move on to Dragon Knights. This is the one class that I have 3 of, which is odd because it's the class I by far play the least of. So I have 3 Dragon Knights. I hardly play any of them. First one I'll talk about is Misato Katsuragi. Gets her name from a character from Neon Genesis Evangelion. And This is a character I've had a hard time really zeroing in on a build that I like for her. Right now, I have her set up as like a DK support brawler. So Davius Starjumper, if he was still around on the show, he would he would certainly enjoy. He is still alive. I should say, Davius Starjumper is still alive. But if he was here on the show, he would greatly approve of the concept of a support brawler. And that's kind of what she's been doing here lately. So her build is Kid Marcher's Cruelty on the front bar with a frost staff, Wretched back bar with a bow. We got two pieces Bloodspawn monster set and the Satan Seducer mythic. And it's kind of a similar concept to how I've played my Necro Despair in the past, as like a kind of like a debuff machine with the Kin Marcher and the Satan Seducer mythic, just kind of tainting everybody around me. It actually works really well on the DK toolkit. It just kind of fits nicely with the skills and stuff that they have. And you can be super flexible on the bar setup. I've tried a ton of different loadouts on the bar setup, and one thing I know that I do like is I like having Cinderstorm, I like having Cauterize, and I like having Burning Talons. I also like having Protective Plate. That's the flappy wings that protects you from ranged attacks and gives you snare immunity. And with that bow on the back bar, that it just combos really nicely with that, because you get your major expedition from roll dodging with a bow, so you can dodge cancel the flappy wings. You got that protection from ranged attacks, the snare removal, and major expedition. So, and it actually makes you a pretty darn effective healer. And then instead of coagulating blood, I use the scribing ability once again, Wield Soul, but I use it as a heal. So I put the heal script on there with major vitality, so I can heal my allies with that. So between Cinderstorm, which is a super duper strong health based heal over time with a really strong snare applied to it, plus Cauterize, recently buffed to be the best heal over time in the game, basically. And then you can have Wield Soul. That's a pretty darn effective little healing kit just right there. And then you could either use the Barrier Ultimate, or I like using the class ability Magma Shell. That's the other morph of Corrosive. So it makes you take a lot less damage while it's active, and it gives your allies an enormous damage shield as well. So it's a really great supportive ultimate to use. So it's actually, yeah, as a support build, it's actually very, very effective. I just kind of have a hard time justifying using it instead of an Arcanist or a Warden or something like that. But shout out to Maddie Quinn, a very, very good friend of mine and an extremely good healer main in this game. And he's been experimenting a bit with a DK healer lately and getting some extremely good results. So who knows? There may be an incoming DK healer meta around the corner. We'll see. Continuing on with the DK talk, my next DK is Bad Sally. And this is the first Dragon Knight that I made. I'm pretty sure she's an orc, and the whole concept of this build is just to be all out damage. Forget anything about survivability, except for just the bare minimum. So it's kind of funny because it's a Dragon Knight, and Dragon Knights are known for kind of being tanky and stuff. But this is by far my squishiest, like least survivable character, but super duper fun nonetheless, especially if you have a pocket healer to follow you around, because the damage is pretty outrageous. And I know there probably is a more effective setup than the one that I'm using, but a lot of the choices here are being made due to flavor, and kind of RP reasons and just kind of cool factor. So I'm using 5 pieces Red Mountain, 2 pieces Vulcan Scoria, the Master's Dual Wield on the front bar, Maelstrom Two-Hander on the back bar, Malakath Band of Brutality, and 1 piece Trainee. So it's just a full-on proc build, right? We have 4 proc sets: Red Mountain, Vulcan Scoria, Master's Dual Wield, Maelstrom Two-Hander. So just all the procs, and it's basically just a dot build. We put Rending Slashes, the Venom Claw, and the Noxious Breath on them. And basically all the procs just kind of start going, and then we just go back to using Rending Slashes as our spammable, since we are using the Master's Dual Wield. We're also using Quick Cloak as our source of major expedition, and gives us major evasion, and it's another dot. So, we just kind of gap close to somebody using Stampede to activate our Maelstrom Two-Hander. Then we put all those dots on people, and we just watch the procs and everything else just eat them alive. And with Malakath, Band of Brutality, it's kind of slept on these days, but on a dot build, like a dot slash proc build like this, it's actually still very, very good. So yeah, this is one of those where like you can just kind of gap close to someone, put your 3 dots on them, and then just run away. And a few seconds later, you'll just see the little notification that they died. They just have such a hard time fighting all that stuff that's on them. So very, very fun. But once again, you do need a bit of support. We just have Vigor and Coagulating Blood as our defensive kit, basically. And the sustain is not great, super duper squishy. And as a DK, it's nothing but melee options that you have. So you either want to, try to get one of your healing buddies to come play with you, or just play very, very cautiously. Or don't, just kind of go for it and go just full ham out with the damage. And, you might surprise yourself. It's a very fun build, very kind of aesthetically fits the whole DK theme. It's just kind of raining fire with the Vulcan and the Red Mountain and all that stuff. It's pretty fun. And then my third and last Dragon Knight, she is a Nord. Shout out to Davia Starjumper. Her name is Flossie, just a completely random name. And basically, the idea was for Bad Sally, the build I just talked about, for her and Flossie here to kind of be sister builds. And they're kind of two different sides of the same coin as far as, what kind of build they are. So the gear is a little different, but there's some similarities. I'm using Dragon's Appetite, 5 pieces Dragon's Appetite, 2 pieces Blood Spawn. Once again, the Master's Dual Wield on the front bar, and the Vadishran 2-hander on the back bar. Malakath Band of Brutality, 1-piece trainee, and exact same bar setup. Exactly like every single slot is identical, except any opportunity that I have to use a morph that gives me healing and damage rather than just damage, I choose that healing and damage option. So instead of Rending Slashes, I'm using Blood Craze for the Master's Dual Wield. Instead of the Venom Claw, I'm using Burning Embers because that gives me a heal while it ticks on somebody. That kind of stuff. Instead of Fossilize, I'm using Shattering Rocks because I get healed whenever people break out of that. So there's just a lot of built-in healing. Plus, Dragon's Appetite has a built-in burst heal as well. So it's a lot more. It's the exact same play style as Bad Sally that I just talked about, but it's a lot brawlier. It's a lot more like you can get up in somebody's face and just kind of stay there. And there's all this incoming heals. You have that Dragon's Appetite heal. You have, you have the Blood Craze. You have the Burning Embers. Whenever you get your leap, that's a reset as well. You get healed whenever somebody breaks out of your Shattering Rocks. Plus, your just actual healing abilities with Vigor and your Coagulating Blood. So it's like one of those builds. You've probably seen Dragon Knights like this where they have so many close calls. They come so close to death so many times, but miraculously, somehow they get through it. They reset. They keep fighting. This is one of those builds that does that. And the damage is very good. I mean, Dragon's Appetite, it's kind of like Draugr. Basically, it's a little less damage, but you get that healing as well. So it's a really great trade-off. And Malakath just juicing up all the damage as well. It's basically still a dot build, so you're still just gap closing to somebody, putting your 3 dots, Blood Craze, Burning Embers, and Nauseous Breath on them. And then you just go back to spamming your Blood Craze, or you could just kind of, like I said, run away and wait for the little notification to tell you that they died. All right, so next up we have my Necromancers. I'll start with Despair. And basically, Despair is like a kind of like a clone copy of my good buddy Uncle Sam's Warden build. If you've ever heard us talk about Icy Claws, I'll call this Icy Bones. It's basically that build, but on a Necro. So it's Ice Furnace as a double bar set, Wretched on the back bar with a Resto Staff, the Maelstrom's Frost Staff on the front bar, Sithis Helm, 1-piece Magma. And it's kind of it's a 50-50 build. We're doing a lot of AoE pressure and we're doing a lot of group support at the same time. And oftentimes you'll come out with like equal healing and damage numbers at the end of a game. It's kind of the whole idea. So main thing, we're just spamming Wall of Frost and Caltrops everywhere. That's kind of the main 2 things that I'm doing. I'm tossing a Blast Bones into the mix on cooldown. And then I'm keeping all my buffs active. I have, of course, my armor buff. I have the Spirit Guardian and the Skeletal Arcanist. And then I heal as needed. I have Echoing Vigor. I have Resistant Flesh. I have the Resto ult. So, Whenever someone needs kind of like some focus healing, I'll do that. But otherwise, I'm just kind of keeping this train rolling. I'm keeping the caltrops and the wall of frost, making sure my enemies are always standing in those things. And otherwise, I'm just keeping timers going all the time. So I'm not really delivering any combo. Like I can't really kill anybody on my own, even though at the end of a game my damage numbers look really, really, really good. I'm just kind of softening up the entire battlefield, dishing out all these debuffs, all this AoE pressure, while also supporting my team. And then my teammates just kind of get the alley oop, and they're the ones kind of snatching up the executes and all that kind of stuff. It's a really fun way to play. I actually really enjoy it because it's kind of relaxed, even though it's very busy. Because it kind of feels like a PVE DPS rotation because you're just kind of maintaining timers the whole time. But as long as you're comfortable with that, it's actually a pretty chill play style. It's very survivable. I'm using 3 protective on the jewelry, plus that Sithis helm, plus the Spirit Guardian, all giving me quite a bit of resistance. I'm also using 3 heavy pieces on the chest, legs, head, and they're all reinforced. So just in general, I'm very survivable. This is a build where I really can kind of run up into the middle of things and just kind of put all my nasty stuff on the ground and just kind of sit there and hold it down while all my teammates take advantage of all the chaos I'm creating. Got all the minions, right? Blast Bones, the Skeletal Arcanist, the Spirit Guardian. So even though none of them are targetable, it still creates this like visual illusion that your enemies are like more outnumbered than they really are. So I feel like it has kind of a psychological effect as well. It's a pretty fun way to play. It feels, to me, it feels like the closest you can get to like a necromancer type of play style. Even though they're called a necromancer, they don't really feel like a summoning class a lot of the time. But to me, this feels like, okay, I'm just running up into the middle of things and just kind of soiling the earth, and everything around me is just struggling. To me, that kind of fits the theme. So that's Despair. My other necro is Bobby Bobango. He's a wood elf, and he's a lot more just kind of just an offensive, straightforward. He's just trying to get some kills. That's his deal. So he's using Venomous Smite on the front bar with an Inferno Staff, Wretched Back Bar with a bow, 2 pieces Mighty Chudan, and Ring of the Wild Hunt, Mythic Ring. Also the one-piece trainee, the Gallant Chain chest piece. And he is a ranged stamina necromancer. Even though it's a flame staff on the front bar, he's using a lot of stamina-based abilities. So Blast Bones, the Venom Skull. He has Elisus. Also, the Wield Soul scribing ability with the Stun script and the Anchorite's Cruelty, and I believe Major Cowardice. Yeah, the Major Cowardice script on there, which is really nice because so Blast Bones, of course, applies Major and Minor Defile. So you have a permanent uptime on Major and Minor Defile. And then with Wield Soul, if you're applying Major Cowardice to them, that's affecting their damage, but also their healing on top of the both defiles. So we're putting a bunch of dots and laying a lot of pressure into them, and they're just having a really hard time out healing all of that stuff because of the 2 defiles and the Major Cowardice. And then, yeah, the one other offensive ability is just Venom Arrow, which we use for our major damage buff, and the Colossus Ultimate. In the back bar, it's just since we're using Mighty Chudan, I'm not using the armor buff. I'm using Shuffle in its place. And then Vigor, Resistant Flesh, Spirit Guardian, and the Reviving Barrier Ultimate. This is a build. It's nothing special. I actually haven't logged in with this guy in a while. He's fun to play with, but it's like if I'm playing a ranged kind of build like this that's sort of multifunctional like that, like I can provide a little support, but I'm mainly here to do damage. I mean, my Templar, my range Plar is going to do a much better job of that. My ranged Nightblade is going to do a much better job of that. So it's hard to kind of justify logging in with this dude other than just for funsies. I just kind of want to enjoy the aesthetics and stuff like that. But it is an effective build. It does work well. All right, now it's Warden time. We'll start off with Hambone Malone. And I have a few different builds for him, but the main one is still that classic Winterborn setup that I've been using for a long time. It's been heavily nerfed, but I still can't find anything better that I enjoy playing any more than this. So it's still what we're doing. So his build is Winterborn as a double bar set, Wretched Vitality on the back bar with a bow, the Master's Frost Staff on the front bar, Sithis Helm, One Piece Magma. And so really it's pairing Winterborn with the Master's Frost Staff. That's the real, the rest of the build can be whatever, but those 2 things just kind of belong together. Using Frost Clench So you can use that to proc your master staff. It's a long range root, so you'll root someone in place, which holds them still long enough to get trapped in that Winterborn snare, and they'll get hit with that damage. They just kind of fit together so perfectly well. So I like using that, and I like using crystallized slab on the back bar. That ice shield that deflects ranged attacks, and it stuns people when it shoots that ice ball back at them. Between that and your frost clench, you have a really great CC situation. And the damage really isn't bad, even though it's been nerfed. We had that, was it the piercing cold passive that gave us that 12% extra damage? But the damage still is pretty decent between those two things, sub assault and crushing shock. I do like using sub assault rather than the deep fissure because I'm using elemental susceptibility for my source of major breach. So in the every 3 second cadence of sub assault, I think I just like that a lot more. So it's like a 50-50 build. We're doing a lot of offense, a lot of kind of frontline brawling, trying to get in people's faces and take all the attention, but we're also spamming polar winds, and we have our armor buff to help people keep their armor buff active, and we got our trees ultimate, so we're definitely being supportive as well. If you're playing a warden and you're not being supportive, you're doing it wrong, regardless of the build. That's Hambone Malone. My other warden is Aunt Lola. And for the longest time, she has been a one bar Oaken Soul healer, pure healer. The setup that I think that I like the most is 5 pieces Gossamer, 2 pieces Ozazon, the Maelstrom Resto Staff, and of course we have that Oaken Soul ring. Bar setup kind of depends on the team that you're rolling with, but kind of my default bar setup is Budding Seeds, Polar Wind, Overflowing Altar, Radiating Regen, the Flappy Wings, and the Resto Ult. So just a pure healer, not even capable of doing damage other than resto heavy attacks would be the only way. It's actually really well. I've surprised some people. We do some Goon Wars things on occasion where no other healers sign up. So I'll be like, okay, I'll be the healer, but it's going to be a one bar healer, and my numbers are on par with everybody else's. It's just we're lacking that utility. We're not able to provide like an armor buff for the team or things like that. But as far as just pure healing output, and really in some ways there's an advantage because you're never having to worry about maintaining timers or buffs or anything like that. You're just 100% focused on just healing all the time. You're just in that zone constantly. And I know some well-respected healer mains that swear that Oaken Soul is the only way to heal. So, take that for what you will. It's perfectly viable, I think, and I've had very good success, and a lot of fun with it. Okay, and then the last character that I have to talk about is Randolph. He is my Arcanist, and this is one of my best builds. The damage with this build is super duper nasty. It is Plague Break as a double bar set, Jargarkin on the front bar with a flame staff, got a Potentate's Bow on the back bar, Sithis Helm, one piece magma. And so basically, I just put the Rune of Displacement on someone. I put Elemental Susceptibility. I use the Wield Soul scribing ability with the Stun script, and very important, the Anchorite's Cruelty script. That's the one that consumes the Soul Gem and puts an Oblivion dot on them. Super duper duper strong, so strong. And then I like using the Rune Blades for the spam bolt. And so with Draugr, that's the set. It adds like 330 damage to all of your instances of damage. So it's really good on like dot and status builds where every single tick of damage is getting that extra 330 damage applied to it. And with your rune blades hitting 3 times per cast, you could also use Force Pulse, which hits 3 times. That Draugr is attaching itself to each one of those hits. So it's like death by like a billion paper cuts, and it sounds like something that might be like a kind of a slow burn build, where over the course of maybe several seconds you'll slowly wear them down with all the dots and everything. But in reality, in practice, they die very fast. Like basically about as fast as you can get your dots applied to them and cast one spammable, they're gone. It kind of feels like a burst build a lot of the time, even though it's just a bunch of dots. It's just eating them up really really fast. So highly recommend this build. And Arcanist, I find Arcanist to be very naturally survivable, even with their recent nerfs that they've gotten to some of their defensive kit. And their sustain is very easy, in my opinion, as well. So like Wretched, not needed, you know. This is one of my easier builds. Like lately with the two-team battleground situation, it's this build right here or one of my sorcerers. Those are the two classes that I've been having a hard time getting away from just because they get extremely good results every single solitary time. And I only have one Arcanist. Everything else I have multiple of, but Arcanist is just the one. And I don't know if I really will have a need to make another one with the armory and all that stuff. So there you have it. That's the entire character roster starting out 2025. We'll see how the year goes. We'll see how these guys do. Really no clue as far as like what kind of balance changes and things like that are coming. Of course, the PTS is supposed to drop. Could be any time, really. So I'll fire this recording back up whenever that drops, and we'll go through all that and see what we got. Okay, so the notes are in. Update 45 PTS patch notes have dropped. Um, like usual, I skip a lot of stuff. I'm really just kind of looking for the information that is relevant to the game that I'm playing. What's going to affect me as I'm logging in day after day, queuing up and playing some BGs. So there's like some housing related stuff and some other things in here that may be of interest to some people and not others. So definitely recommend just heading over to elderscrollsonline.com, going to the forums, to the public test server section, and just skimming through these notes yourself, because I'm certainly skipping quite a bit. But so this is, to start with, it's basically a typical Q1 update, although I don't think ZOS is really thinking in terms of quarterly releases anymore. We'll talk about that a little while later. But we are getting a dungeon pack whenever this patch goes live. So they're calling it the Fallen Banners content as far as like these dungeons go. And it's going to be two dungeons, one called Exiled Redoubt and another called Lep Seclusa. L-E-P, Lep Seclusa. And story-wise, they say they're going to be focused on some of the kind of broader implications of the Three Banners War. So there's going to be like a Cyrodiil tie-in, which is interesting because we'll talk about a little bit later. But they're going to be, they talked about recently going to be doing some Cyrodiil testing, and they seem to have kind of a PvP focus here lately, and even going forward, seems to be something that is kind of in their sights right now, which is refreshing, I got to say. I know there's a lot of people in the PvP community are kind of like apprehensive right now and not super optimistic about what's to come. But I do want to point out that focus is being put on PvP right now, and that has not always been the case. It's actually, basically has never been the case for as long as I've been playing this game. So to be getting some attention on Battlegrounds and on Cyrodiil and that sort of stuff, whether they implemented, like Battlegrounds, whether it turned out the way that I wanted it to or not, is another story. The truth is, a lot of people really seem to be enjoying the new Battleground situation, and the fact that they're just putting effort into it at all is a good thing. So anyway, two new dungeons that are story-wise kind of wrapped into Cyrodiil and the Three Banners War. Bunch of new armor sets as well, of course. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but two that stood out to me. There's a heavy armor set called Heroic Unity. You get a line of stamina, a line of max health, a line of max health, and then the 5-piece Activating a Synergy gives you and up to 3 group members within 12 meters major heroism for 6 seconds. And that can happen every 1 second. So if you're on a team that's pumping out a bunch of synergies, I mean, you could potentially have a really good uptime on major heroism right there. I think right now Drake's Rush is the only other set that would be competing with this that is like a way to give your team major heroism, and that requires you to bash people. So if you're looking for a different proc condition or just an alternative to Drake's Rush, here it is right here, Activating a Synergy, and with the right team comp, could have a 100% uptime on that, maybe potentially. So that's a heavy armor set called Heroic Unity, and then we have a medium armor set called Lamp Knight's Art. Lamp Knight's Art. You get a line of max stamina, a line of max stamina, a line of weapon and spell damage, and get a load of this 5-piece. Gain 100,000 offensive penetration, but also reduces your damage done by 46%. So it's like a wild, you hear that 100,000 penetration, you're like, what the heck? But then it's reducing your damage done by 46%. So, that 100,000 penetration, basically that just means that nobody has any armor against you. The armor cap is like 33,000, something like that. So very rare do people have more resistance than that. So, basically this only really matters. Like I think, so this is reducing your damage by 46%. I think like right around 30,000 armor is like 46% damage mitigation. So you have to be fighting someone who has at least 30,000 resistance or more in order for this to even be a set that's worth wearing at all, just because of that damage reduction. And some people, we were talking about this in Discord, some people were chiming in, and actually, if you consider all the other kind of mitigation calculations that are being factored in and stuff, it's even worse than that, actually. So this, that 100,000 penetration sounds like, wow, that's incredible. But yeah, that 46% damage reduction that you're getting at the same time, it's basically impossible to overcome that. You're basically just better off wearing any other just normal damage set. So. But it's an interesting one just because of the numbers they're going on there. And who knows? I mean, I have no doubt some people may find some way to incorporate this into a build that's super duper beneficial. I don't know. People surprise you, a lot of things that just don't seem obvious right away. People find a way to kind of work it into a build or something. So there's a bunch of other new sets. Those are the only two that really kind of stood out. The others to me kind of seemed pretty boring. There's quite a few of they seem to be really on this thing of like when you leave an effect on the ground, then that causes something to happen. There's like 3 sets that's the proc condition for them. But yeah, new sets. They're also doing some map improvements so that it's just easier to read the map and kind of understand what the icons and stuff mean. I think they're kind of filtering out icons depending on the context and stuff like that, just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. There are these new crime mini events in the world as you're going around. I guess kind of like how, as you're running around, there'll be just like these random Daedric encounters that will appear for you to deal with. Sounds like maybe something like that, but maybe it'll be specifically in towns. There's a lot of info in the actual patch notes about it. But yeah, there's going to be these new just spontaneous events that are going on around the crime system. They are introducing console add-ons. So console players will now be able to benefit from add-ons. It seems like it's not going to be exactly the same. It's not just like all PC add-ons are suddenly going to be available on console. I think the people who create these add-ons will specifically have to make them for consoles. And it seems like maybe it's somewhat more restrictive than it is on PC, but I don't know. I'm not, the information is not super clear to me as someone who doesn't really make add-ons, But anyway, just console players having access to add-ons just sounds incredible. As far as combat and balance changes, really nothing at all significant is happening. Anything significant happening combat-wise is really just kind of happening with the armor sets, with like the new armor sets that are being introduced or changes to existing sets. But as far as like skills and stuff like that, there's some fixes and stuff that are in the patch notes here. But as far as anything that you're actually going to notice, in your gameplay, nothing really happening there. So some changes to existing sets. There's quite a few actually. Most of them are pretty minor and not very impactful. There's a handful of sets that they just adjusted the 2 through 4 piece bonuses. Like instead of max stamina, they changed it to crit or whatever. There's quite a few examples of that. But here's a pretty impactful one: Way of Fire, very popular set. So this set now only activates off of light and heavy attacks rather than any weapon attack. So you can't just put poison injection on somebody and run away and just count on that way of fire ticking away on them every 2 seconds. You actually have to be consistently light attack weaving to be getting that damage potential out of way of fire. Um, I've seen some people say they think this is a dead set now. I don't think it's completely dead. I think especially in the dueling area, like if you go to Stormhaven and watch some duelers there, a fair number of those people do use Way of Fire, and I've even known a fair number of people that don't even have a weapon dot slotted at all. They're just relying on those light attack weaves to keep Way of Fire procced. And in particular, in 1v1 duels, I think Way of Fire still has a place. But a very popular play style is for someone to equip Sheer Venom, Way of Fire, and they just put poison injection on somebody, and then they just cloak and run away and just watch the person struggle for their life with all those dots on them. So they're taking that away, basically. Way of Fire is no longer going to be a part of that equation right there, which I'm thankful for, honestly. It's such a low effort play style, honestly. I feel like Way of Fire now is still very good for its intended purpose, for you to be like an actual active combatant rather than just hitting someone with one single dot and running away and waiting for the notification to appear that they died, which is a lot of people do use the set that way currently. Poisonous Serpent, which is basically like a poison version of Way of Fire. They reduce the damage by 92%. So it does, like, the initial attack hardly deals any damage, but now it guarantees applies the poison status. Always applies the poison status. Also, it no longer activates the 1 second global cooldown for other instant damage procs. You know how like an instant burst damage proc, like no two can proc at the same time, right? Well, this no longer counts as that. So if you have another proc set on your build, then it can proc at the same time as this build, or as this set, basically. But yeah, it's not you're not getting this kind of burst of damage every other light attack the way it has been used up to this point. It's basically just it's a set that's going to ensure a permanent uptime on the poison status. That's kind of what it's all about now. Another set adjustment that I want to mention is Soul Cleaver, the Nightblade class set from the Infinite Archive. This set now increases the potency of your siphoning abilities by 21% instead of 18%. This is already a set that I super duper love. You heard me talk about it lots and lots of times. I love Soul Cleaver. That's a pretty significant buff there. And yeah, so that's great. I don't see a lot of people using this set, but I do think it's slept on. I think it's one of the very best sets in the game if you build for it. And I mean, that's basically all the significant stuff as far as I'm concerned in the patch notes. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in there that other people might be interested in. Really not much for BGs. I think they added a couple of flags for Crazy King in a couple of maps, which is actually the opposite of what I would have requested. I want fewer flags. I want people to all be going to the same spot so they're all fighting. But I think they're pretty out of touch as far as PvP and battlegrounds go. But maybe that's going to change. Like they got this Q&A coming up that seems to be like PvP centric. Like they're really specifically looking for feedback about PvP, and they're about to do the Cyrodiil test, here pretty soon. And I don't know. It seems like maybe they're starting to take the PvP crowd a little bit more seriously than in the past, which is obviously a good thing for me, as a PvP player. Let's see. They're also starting to do some visual overhauls to the base game zones. So they're starting with the starter zones, but my impression is they're just gonna kind of continuously be working on this throughout the entire game. All the vanilla zones, just kind of giving them a visual overhaul, kind of adjusting the lighting and the textures and things like that, which is awesome. I think that's a great thing. I think that's something that's long overdue for this game. It needs a visual update. I have some friends that have been playing Throne and Liberty quite a bit here lately, and I'll watch them stream and play that game, and I'm like, man, this game looks so good. And then I log into ESO, which I love ESO, obviously, but the graphics by comparison are a bit dated. But anyway, there's some new houses they're going to be introducing, some new collectibles, and just kind of a host of the usual just bug fixes. They do a lot of stuff with streamlining some quests and things like that. Stuff that's kind of in every set of patch notes that we get. So this is just week one of PTS. Next week, week two of PTS, they're going to be starting these Cyrodiil tests. And this is like a test for a test, like they did a live stream kind of talking about this recently, but basically for PTS, the population to properly test anything in Cyrodiil is just not going to be there. So they can't really do a proper test unless it's on the live server. So all this is going to be on PTS is kind of a functionality test. They have these ideas that they want to try. They're just going to kind of see if it's technically feasible on PTS, and then the real test will come later on the live server with the full population and everything. But what they were talking about on that live stream, the thing that they're going to be testing is when you load into this specific campaign in Cyrodiil, then suddenly your class abilities are like an altered version. They're like a PvP specific version. Um, Basically, a lot, very, very, very simplified. Like everything's just heavily nerfed, basically, and absolutely no class passives whatsoever. Those are just gone. So, very interesting that you just have a whole new kind of set of skills to work with once you're in this campaign. Also, once you load into this campaign, they're going to drop a bunch of special gear into your inventory that is specific gear to be used in that campaign, and your normal gear won't work. You have to use this special, you know, gear that's made for this campaign. And then when you port out of that campaign, that gear disappears out of your inventory. So it's just there when you're when you're in Cyrodiil. It's a very interesting thing. They repeat it about 1,000 times. It's just a test. It's just a test. This isn't necessarily the direction that they're going with things, but their ultimate goal is to improve performance to the point to where they can have a population cap to where it was in 2015. Whatever those numbers were. There were a lot more players possible back then, and it wasn't really impacting performance. And I don't know why that is exactly, but that's their stated goal. Is they want to increase that population cap so we can just have a whole bunch more players involved. Which I agree, that's something that is missing from Cyrodiil. So if this is what we got to do to get there, maybe it's worth it. But man, I don't know. That just makes Cyrodiil seem even less appealing to me. Like a major thing. The thing that I love about this game is making my build that is my build that I made, and then seeing it in action. It's so satisfying to, I feel so smart. I came up with this idea for this build and then I go put it in action and it works. Wow, look at that. But now if I have to pour it in and I have to use this special gear that everyone else has to use, and I'm severely stripped of a lot of what makes my class and what makes my build special and all that stuff. I think I would just stay out of that campaign myself, personally. There may be some people that are into that, and it's not, as long as it's contained within a specific campaign, that's fine. This isn't the first time. Like they had no proc Cyrodiil, no proc Imperial City for the longest time, and a lot of people really enjoyed that. And if you weren't interested in that, then there were the other normal campaigns that kind of went by the normal rules. So I'm not worried about them like ruining PvP. This isn't going to apply to Battlegrounds, which is kind of my little haven. So it's fine. Go ahead. Let's do the test. Let's see. All I'm saying is, if this is the direction that they end up going, I will absolutely never ever enter that campaign myself. That's all I'm saying. One other thing I want to talk about just a little bit here is, we've gotten some communication recently about what their plans are for 2025 and just kind of generally going on into the future. There was a letter from studio director Matt Fyror. If you go to elderscrollsonline.com, it's one of the main kind of articles there. But it's an open letter to the community about what their plans are going forward. And basically, long story short, is they're moving away from this quarterly release schedule that we've had basically since the very beginning. And they're moving towards a season based content release schedule. So I think they said it's going to be there'll be these seasons that are either 3 months or 6 months in duration, and just over the course of that period of time, they'll just kind of be sprinkling in bits and pieces of content rather than just kind of one big release all at once, like one big chapter with all the content all at once, you know. So I think you can interpret that a couple of different ways, right? There's the obvious, it sounds like we're just going to be getting less content, right? And I think that is kind of what they're saying. But I'm thinking of this from the perspective of a PvP person, someone who primarily I'm logging into this game just to play some BGs. And when they do release chapters and story content and stuff like that, I do play it, but that's not really why I'm here. Like the real thing that I'm interested in is like, okay, give me a new skill line to play with, give me a new class to play with, that kind of stuff is really what I get excited about. And so I think a really positive interpretation of this communication is like, okay, maybe now we don't have to wait for an entire chapter release to get a new class or to get a new skill line. They could just drop a new skill line into the class or into the game all by itself, and just sell that in the crown store or make it achievable somehow or whatever. In that letter, Matt talks about like, now we can release content when it's ready. If we have a team of people working on something and then they have it ready, then we can put it into the game rather than having to meet this arbitrary deadline just because, for whether it's ready or not. So I think from a PvP perspective, I know me and a ton of my friends, when we get these new chapters like Gold Road or Necrom and that sort of stuff, they don't play the story content. All they want is like, okay, sweet, we have a new class. I'm going to make a new build with that class and go play some BGs. That's all they want. So I think for a lot of people, this sounds like, yeah, maybe we're getting less content, but maybe more of the content that we do actually care about. If they don't have to spend all this time creating all these new zones and all these new assets for everything and all like that, maybe that's time that can be dedicated to a new skill line or a new class or a new race or something like that. Something that's really interesting from a PvP perspective. So I will say the last couple of years, if you remember a couple of years ago, we had a similar communication of like, okay, we're kind of changing up the roadmap. We're going to go a little bit direction going forward, and we'll see how it goes. And yeah, it's basically it has been less content than what we've gotten previously, but I would argue the quality of the content has skyrocketed. You know, the past two chapters, in my opinion, have been really good, just from a gameplay like story perspective, like playing through the quest line and enjoying the zone and seeing the sights. Very engaging, very captivating. Plus, Arcanist class, they nailed it. Scribing, they nailed it. Like so. Yeah, maybe the quantity has gone down, but the quality has gone way, way up. And if that is the way that they continue, then I'm all for it. Let's do it. If you want to start releasing fewer chapters, fewer kind of large chunks of content, but then you are sprinkling in more things that I do actually care about, and it's implemented well, I'm into it. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm all for it. He also talked a little bit about how, like, when they do release story content, they're going to kind of be utilizing existing base game zones. They're going to revisit factions like Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, kind of things like that. There's a lot of assets and things that they already have that they can lean on for more content to free up their developers to work on other things. So, depending on the kind of player you are, that could sound like doom and gloom. To me, honestly, it sounds like possibly some really positive things ahead for the PvP crowd. And they've just put a lot of effort into Battlegrounds. It sounds like they're about to put a lot of effort into Cyrodiil. I know there's a lot of skeptics out there, but I think there is reason to be optimistic for 2025 in ESO. So I guess, that's basically all the stuff I have to talk about. I did receive an email, scrollingpodcast@gmail.com. That's the email address. If you'd like to send an email, that is the place to send it. I got an email from, I'll pronounce it as best I can, Kara Stounce. Kara Stounce says, Hey, my man, for the last 2 months, your podcast has been one of my number one sources of entertainment on my long drives home. You, your co-host, and your guests have allowed me to think outside the box when it comes to builds and theorycraft for BGs and all things PvP, which I'm a huge fan of in this game. Keep up the content. Sincerely, Kara Stounce. They also asked to join the Discord, which I sent them an invite, and they're already in there. So yeah, thank you very much for the email. Always great to hear. Scrollandpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to support the show, two main ways you can do that. One is give me gold. I make a lot of builds. I do a lot of research for the podcast, and it takes gold to do that stuff. So at Cat Sparrowhawk, you can just email me gold on PCNA. You can also just spread the word. If you know of anyone that might enjoy the show, just send them over to scrollandpodcast.com. That has all the important links of where they might want to listen, how to contact the show, all that sort of stuff. That's just scrollandpodcast.com. And I think that's all I have to talk about today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Speaking in a microphone, opening a can of an energy drink.